When people talk about cold-blooded killers, they usually imagine stone-faced men or notorious names that have been recycled in headlines. But some of the most calculated, emotionless, and unsettling crimes have come from women, and specifically this time, women whose stories rarely make it to the front pages. These women didn't kill out of panic or desperation. Their actions were measured, intentional, and chilling to the core. From revenge-driven executions to manipulation-fueled slaughters, these women showed a level of detachment that leaves even seasoned detectives speechless. In this video, we're diving into the most cold-blooded women in modern crime history. The ones who didn't flinch, didn't waver, and in some cases, didn't even blink. Katherine Knight. Country, Australia. Age at time of crime, 44. Katherine Knight's crime is one of the most disturbing stories ever recorded in Australia's criminal history. In the year 2000, after years of being violent and controlling, she finally acted out her darkest threats. Her victim was her partner, John Price, a man who had already reported her abusive behavior multiple times. But nothing could have prepared him, or anyone else, for what she had in mind. On the night of the murder, Katherine stabbed him repeatedly, at least 37 times, chasing him through the house as he struggled to escape. It was a brutal and frenzied attack that showed no mercy. But what happened after the stabbing is what truly horrified the nation. Instead of stopping at murder, Katherine took things to a level that felt straight out of a horror film. She skinned John's body completely, then decapitated him, and proceeded to cook parts of his flesh with vegetables as if she was preparing a family dinner. Even worse, she arranged the cooked body parts on plates with name tags meant for John's children. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a pot of his flesh boiling on the stove. The crime scene was so gruesome and twisted that even veteran detectives were shaken to their core. The following day, Katherine was found unconscious from a failed suicide attempt. She was arrested immediately and later brought to court. At first, she entered a not guilty plea, but as the trial approached and the evidence stacked up, she switched to a guilty plea. The courts didn't need much convincing as the evidence was overwhelming, and the nature of the crime was too horrific for any jury to even sit through. Throughout the proceedings, she showed no remorse or emotion. In a decision that made headlines across the country, the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, making her the first woman in Australian history to receive that sentence. To this day, Katherine Knight remains behind bars at Silverwater Women's Correctional Centre in New South Wales. She has never fully taken responsibility or expressed any true remorse for what she did. Her case isn't just remembered, it's studied, feared, and used as a chilling reminder of how dark human nature can go. Joanna Dennehy. Country, United Kingdom. Age at time of crime, 30. Joanna Dennehy isn't just one of the most dangerous women in British criminal history. She's one of the rare few who actually fits the mold of a cold, calculated female serial killer. In 2013, over the span of just 10 days, she went on a killing spree that left 3 men dead and 2 others severely injured. But what made it even more terrifying was how casual and remorseless she was throughout. She didn't kill out of rage or desperation, but did so because she enjoyed it, even telling her accomplice she wanted to kill 9 men in total, just for fun. The first victim was her own housemate, Lukasz Slaboszewski, whom she stabbed in the heart. Days later, she killed 2 more who were John Chapman and Kevin Lee with chilling precision. After dumping their bodies in ditches, she dressed Lee's corpse in a black sequin dress and left him in a grotesque pose purely for shock value. As if that wasn't enough, she went on to randomly stab 2 strangers, men she had never met during a violent road trip, laughing as they screamed for help. She later described the whole experience as moreish, like murder had become a high she wanted to keep chasing. Her trial shocked the UK. Joanna showed no regret, no empathy, and even smiled in court while gruesome details of her crimes were being shared. She pled guilty to all charges, including 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. The judge had no hesitation, and she was handed a whole life order, meaning she will never be released. She became only the 3rd woman in UK history to receive that sentence, alongside notorious names like Myra Hindley and Rosemary West. Joanna is currently locked up at HMP Bronzefield, a high-security women's prison in England. She has been labeled a manipulative psychopath, with psychologists stating she poses an extreme danger to society. Her lack of remorse and hunger for killing have earned her a permanent spot on the list of the most cold-blooded women the world has ever seen. Aileen Wuornos. Country, United States, Florida. Age at time of crime, 33 to 34. Aileen Wuornos is often referred to as America's first female serial killer, but her story is far more complex and disturbing than just that title. Between 1989 and 1990, Aileen shot and killed 7 men in Florida. She claimed each killing was in self-defense, saying the men had either assaulted or tried to assault her while she was working as a worker. But as the murders continued and the bodies started stacking up, investigators began to see a pattern. Each victim was found shot multiple times, their vehicles stolen and pawned for cash. Aileen didn't just vanish after her crimes, but she went on spending sprees with her girlfriend, Tyria Moore, using her victims' belongings like trophies. What really stood out to investigators was the cold efficiency of her crimes. She used a .22 caliber pistol, left little evidence, and often targeted men she deemed vulnerable. Even when arrested, she didn't crack easily. She later confessed to the killings in a straightforward, almost casual tone, like it was just another day in her life. Her trial drew nationwide attention. Aileen was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder and was eventually convicted and sentenced to death. During the legal process, she bounced between claiming self-defense and openly admitting to killing because she hated men. At times, she raged in court, lashing out at the system, the media, and even her own lawyers. Her behavior became increasingly erratic, and she seemed to unravel as her execution date drew near. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at the Florida State Prison. Her final words were eerie and bizarre, and she said, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus." She died at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Juana Barraza. Country, Mexico. Age at time of crime, 41 to 48. Juana Barraza, known as La Mataviejitas, which means the little old lady killer, terrorized Mexico City for years, and no one even suspected her. Between the late 1990s and 2006, she targeted elderly women, sneaking into their homes under the guise of offering help or government support. But once she gained their trust, she would strangle them with phone cords, stockings, or whatever she could find, sometimes using her bare hands. Authorities believe she killed at least 16, but the actual number could be double or even higher. Her victims were all over 60, vulnerable, and lived alone. What made Juana's case so chilling was her twisted motive. She later admitted that her hatred for older women stemmed from deep childhood trauma. Her own mother had abused her and sold her off to a man when she was just a teenager. Somehow that pain transformed into calculated rage, and the fact that she was once a professional wrestler, known in the ring as the Silent Lady, made her double life even more unbelievable. She was strong, strategic, and completely unsuspecting, even helping police at times to throw off suspicion. For years, law enforcement struggled to catch her, even arresting the wrong people at one point. It wasn't until 2006 when she was caught leaving the home of her final victim. Then everything came crashing down. Juana didn't deny the murders. In fact, she confessed to several of them in detail. In 2008, she was convicted of 11 counts of murder and sentenced to 759 years in prison, though under Mexican law, she'll serve a maximum of 60 years. She's currently serving her time at Santa Marta Acatitla, women's prison in Mexico City. Juana Barraza remains one of the most cold-blooded female serial killers in Latin America. Angela Simpson. Country, United States, Arizona. Age at time of crime, 33. Angela Simpson didn't just kill her victim, but she tortured him for days. And when she was finally arrested, she looked straight into the camera and told the world exactly why she did it. In 2009, in Phoenix, Arizona, Simpson lured a disabled man named Terry Neely into her apartment. What followed was a scene straight out of a nightmare. She accused him of being a snitch and decided he didn't deserve to live. Over the course of 3 full days, she beat him with a tire iron, pulled out his teeth with pliers, stabbed him multiple times, and then strangled him to death with a cable. After she killed him, Angela stuffed Terry's body into a trash can, rolled it to a church parking lot, and set it on fire. Investigators found his charred remains and eventually traced it back to her. But what made this case stand out even more than the brutality was how proud Angela was about what she did. In a now infamous jailhouse interview, she showed zero remorse, smiled through the questions, and said she only regretted not killing him slower. She even added, "Yes, I'm the one who killed him. I don't regret it. I'm glad I did it. I wish I had done it in front of his mother." In court, there was no back and forth. She pled guilty without hesitation and told the judge exactly what she thought, that she wanted the death penalty and that she'd gladly kill again under the same circumstances. Instead, she received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and 2 additional sentences, totaling 44 years for the abuse and kidnapping. The courtroom sat in silence as she casually accepted her fate, like it was just another day. Angela Simpson is now serving her sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville. Her case still shocks anyone who comes across it, not just because of what she did, but because of how openly she embraced it. No excuses, no pretending, just raw violence, hatred, and pride in the act itself. She didn't just commit a cold-blooded murder, she owned it like a badge. Leonarda Cianciulli. Country, Italy. Age at time of crime, 46 to 47. Leonarda Cianciulli might have looked like an ordinary Italian housewife in the 1930s and 40s, but behind her friendly smile was a disturbing obsession with superstition, control, and human flesh. Known as the soap maker of Correggio, she brutally murdered 3 women between 1939 and 1940. But this wasn't just about killing as it was what she did. After that made her one of the most twisted women in crime history. After luring her victims into her home with promises of fortune-telling or spiritual help, she drugged and chopped their bodies into pieces. She then boiled their remains, turned the fat into soap, and even used their blood in tea cakes she served to neighbors. Leonarda believed she had to perform these sacrifices to protect her son, who was serving in the military. She was heavily superstitious and claimed a fortune teller once told her that all of her children would die young unless she made human sacrifices. To her, the murders weren't just practical, they were sacred. She didn't pick strangers either. Her victims were women she knew personally, women who trusted her, which made the betrayals even more disturbing. Eventually, one of the victims was reported missing, and suspicion fell on Leonarda. When police came knocking, she confessed without hesitation, even correcting investigators on the details of the crimes when they got it wrong. Her lack of remorse and the graphic way she described turning her victims into soap and baked goods stunned the public. During her trial, she remained calm, even cracking jokes, like she didn't just confess to something straight out of a nightmare. In 1946, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum, an eerie fulfillment of a fortune told to her earlier in life. Leonarda died in custody in 1970. She didn't just kill, but she turned murder into a ritual, a recipe, and a lifestyle. Beverly Allitt. Country, United Kingdom. Age at time of crime, 22 to 23. Beverly Allitt was trusted to care for sick children, but instead, she used her position as a pediatric nurse to carry out one of the most chilling hospital killing sprees in UK history. Between February and April of 1991, at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire, she deliberately harmed 13 young patients, leading to the deaths of 4 innocent children. These weren't accidents or mistakes. Beverly injected her victims with insulin, air bubbles, and even potassium, causing them to go into cardiac arrest, suffer brain damage, or die slowly in their hospital beds. The horror was made worse by the fact that the children were already vulnerable, toddlers and infants placed in her care. Instead of helping them heal, Beverly took advantage of the trust parents had in her white coat. She often remained close to the grieving families afterward, offering sympathy and pretending to be heartbroken. Her calm demeanor and nurse-next-door image made it even harder for doctors to believe something sinister was happening. But as the death toll rose and patterns emerged, suspicions pointed straight at her. When investigators finally dug deeper, they uncovered overwhelming evidence. Beverly had been on duty during every suspicious death or medical emergency, and most of the victims had unexplained symptoms that matched poisoning or air embolisms. She was arrested and stood trial in 1993. Despite never giving a full confession, she was convicted on 4 counts of murder, 3 of attempted murder, and 6 counts of grievous bodily harm. The judge handed her 13 life sentences, a clear message that her crimes would never be forgotten. Beverly Allitt is currently being held at Rampton Secure Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility in Nottinghamshire. Her actions earned her the nickname the Angel of Death, and her case remains one of the darkest examples of medical betrayal in modern history. What made her especially cold-blooded was her ability to blend in, smile to grieving parents, and then go back to harm another child, all while hiding behind a nurse's uniform. Dorothea Puente. Country, United States, California. Age at time of crime, 50s to 60s. Dorothea Puente looked like the sweet old landlady next door with gray hair, glasses, and a soft voice. But behind that grandmotherly image was a woman running one of the most chilling operations in Sacramento's history. During the 1980s, she operated a boarding house where she targeted elderly, disabled, and mentally ill tenants, murdering them and burying their bodies in her backyard. Her motive? Pure greed. She forged their signatures, cashed their social security checks, and kept up appearances like nothing was wrong. At least 9 bodies were discovered in her yard, though many believe the actual number of victims could be higher. Dorothea used sleeping pills or sedatives to quietly kill her victims, then had an ex-con handyman help her dispose of the bodies, claiming they had simply moved out. She even continued collecting their government checks long after they were dead. While the rest of the neighborhood thought she was just a kind-hearted woman, helping people down on their luck, she was literally making a living off their deaths. Her downfall came in 1988. when a social worker grew suspicious about a missing client. After police searched the property and started digging, they uncovered the remains of multiple victims. Even then, Dorothea tried to play innocent, going so far as to leave town while pretending she had no idea what was going on. She was eventually caught in Los Angeles, where she had already started chatting up a new potential victim at a bar. In 1993, Dorothea was convicted of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. She died in 2011 at the Central California Women's Facility. Jodi Arias. Country: United States, Arizona. Age at time of crime: 27. Jodi Arias went from a quiet, seemingly sweet woman to a national headline when the gruesome details of her boyfriend's murder came to light. In 2008, she killed Travis Alexander, a 30-year-old motivational speaker, in one of the most brutal and premeditated crimes Arizona had seen. Jodi first shot him in the head, then stabbed him nearly 30 times, and finally slit his throat from ear to ear, nearly decapitating him. The crime scene was drenched in blood, and the sheer rage behind the attack shocked even seasoned investigators. What made the case even more twisted was the way Jodi tried to cover it up. She initially denied being anywhere near Travis's home at the time of the murder. Then, when evidence placed her at the scene, she claimed masked intruders had killed him. Eventually, when the evidence became undeniable, including a camera with photos of the murder happening in real time, she changed her story once again, this time saying she killed Travis in self-defense. But it was clear this wasn't about defense, as it was about revenge, obsession, and control. The trial was a media circus. Jodi's calm demeanor on the stand contrasted sharply with the gruesome details being presented. She spoke in a soft, composed voice, even while describing the killing. She testified for 18 days, and the courtroom watched in disbelief as she tried to paint Travis as abusive, while evidence overwhelmingly pointed to her as the manipulative aggressor. In 2013, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. Although the jury deadlocked on the death penalty, she was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jodi Arias is now serving her sentence at Arizona State Prison, Perryville. She didn't just kill, but she played mind games every step of the way, making her one of the most manipulative killers of modern times. Christine Falling. Country: United States. Age at time of crime: 17 to 19. Christine Falling had the face of an innocent teenage girl, but behind that, she was quietly snuffing out lives without remorse. Between 1980 and 1982, this Florida teen became known as the babysitter from hell, after a wave of mysterious deaths started following every child she cared for. It started with a 2-year-old left in her care, dead with no warning, no obvious cause. Then another, then another. Every time, doctors blamed sudden illness or crib death. No one suspected Christine, at least not yet. But she didn't stop at babies. She moved on to an elderly man she was hired to care for, and he died under just as strange circumstances. Christine kept slipping through the cracks, spinning stories about seizures and bad luck. But by 1982, when a 10-week-old baby died in her care with signs of suffocation, police finally dug deeper. The autopsies told a different story, which were internal injuries, signs of smothering, blunt force trauma. These kids didn't just die, they were murdered. When she was finally questioned, Christine cracked. In her confession, she admitted to killing at least 6 people, all of them either children or elderly, because she felt a sudden urge and heard voices telling her to do it. Sometimes, she said, she was just tired of them crying. The way she described the murders was chilling, with no emotion, no guilt, no fear. She said it like she was talking about feeding a pet. She even said killing gave her a strange kind of relief. Christine Falling was sentenced to life without parole. Though eligible for parole after 25 years, her request was denied in 2017 due to the disturbing nature of her crimes. She remains locked up at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. Even in prison, she is never seen crying or remorseful. Her case remains one of the darkest examples of how pure evil can hide in the least suspected places: a teenage girl, a trusted babysitter, and a silent serial killer who killed the most vulnerable with her bare hands. Judy Buenoano. Country: United States. Age at time of crime: 27 to 41. Judy Buenoano was the kind of woman who didn't just kill for revenge. She killed for profit, power, and the calm that followed chaos. Between 1971 and 1983, she slowly built a trail of death around her, starting with her own husband. He was poisoned with arsenic and died of natural causes, or so doctors thought. Years later, her paraplegic son mysteriously drowned during a canoe trip. She claimed the boat tipped, and when another boyfriend miraculously survived a car bombing, the whole puzzle finally started coming together. Judy had a pattern which was love them, insure them, kill them. Her motive was cold-blooded financial gain. After every death, she cashed in on life insurance policies she had quietly taken out behind the scenes. Her son Michael's death was especially disturbing, as he had survived arsenic poisoning that left him paralyzed, only for Judy to strap him into a canoe and let him drown. The cruelty wasn't random, it was methodical. She operated under the radar for over a decade, moving from state to state, changing names and seducing new men. It wasn't until the car bomb failed to kill her last fiancé, John Gentry, that investigators dug deeper. They uncovered forged documents, multiple insurance claims, and a chilling lack of remorse. Judy's calm demeanor in court shocked everyone, with no tears, no apologies. She maintained her innocence, even when the evidence was stacked high. Judy Buenoano became the first woman executed in Florida since 1848, and the third woman executed in the U.S. after the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. She was nicknamed the Black Widow, and the name fit. Poison, drowning, and explosives, she used them all like tools in a murder kit. She didn't just kill people, she erased them and profited from their absence. Cold doesn't even begin to describe it, as she was ice. Mitchell Blair. Country: United States, Michigan. Age at time of crime: 35. Mitchell Blair's case stands out as one of the most horrifying and unforgettable crimes in recent American history. On the surface, Blair appeared to be a struggling single mother living in a cramped Detroit apartment with her 4 children. But what police discovered in her home on March 24, 2015, would reveal a nightmare beyond anyone's comprehension. While attempting to evict Blair from her residence for unpaid rent, court officers opened a deep freezer in the living room, and inside they found the frozen bodies of 2 children, 13-year-old Stoney Ann Blair and 9-year-old Stephen Gage Berry. Both children had been dead for years, Stoney since 2013 and Stephen since 2012, both hidden away in plain sight, while Blair continued living with her 2 surviving children. The horror of what happened to the deceased children became even more disturbing once Blair spoke. During court proceedings, she gave an unflinching, remorseless confession, calmly detailing how she murdered Stephen by punching, burning, and eventually suffocating him with a plastic bag. She claimed she killed him because he had allegedly abused his younger brother. A year later, she said she murdered Stoney after accusing her of doing the same to her younger sibling. Blair beat, starved, and tortured her daughter before killing her. What shocked the courtroom wasn't just her matter-of-fact tone, but the way she expressed pride in what she had done and insisted she would do it all over again, and that she had no regrets whatsoever. Mitchell Blair's disturbing statements continued to draw national attention. In interviews and during sentencing, she displayed a chilling lack of empathy and emotional detachment. She claimed to be protecting her youngest child, and despite prosecutors and child psychologists presenting evidence that contradicted her claims, she remained steadfast in her justification. The state chose not to pursue the death penalty, as Michigan abolished capital punishment long ago, but the court handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Blair waived her right to a trial and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. She was also found guilty of child abuse, torture, and concealing a death. Her demeanor throughout the process was cold, combative, and unapologetic, and left a deep impact on everyone who watched. Now housed at the Huron Valley Correctional Facility for Women, Blair remains one of the most reviled inmates in Michigan's prison system. Inmates and staff alike are aware of the gruesome details of her case. Mitchell Blair is not just feared for what she did, but for how willingly and unremorsefully she did it. Stephanie Lazarus. Country, United States, California. Age at time of crime, 29. Stephanie Lazarus was a trusted LAPD officer with a clean reputation and a rising career, but underneath the badge was a woman who had committed one of the most cold-blooded and personal murders Los Angeles had ever seen. In 1986, she murdered 29-year-old nurse Sherry Rasmussen, the new wife of her ex-boyfriend, John Rutan. Stephanie had dated John on and off for years and couldn't stand that he had moved on and married someone else. Jealousy consumed her, and instead of letting it go, she decided to eliminate the competition. She showed up at Sherry's condo, got into a violent struggle, and then shot her 3 times at close range, leaving her body in a staged scene meant to look like a home invasion gone wrong. For more than 2 decades, Stephanie lived like nothing had happened. The murder was classified as an unsolved robbery, and Lazarus continued working as a police officer, ironically in the very department that failed to catch her. She married another cop, adopted a child, and even became a detective. All the while, the real story remained buried, literally. Nobody at the time seriously looked into her, despite her known connection to John. Sherry's parents were suspicious from the beginning, but their concerns were brushed aside. It wasn't until DNA technology advanced in the 2000s that the truth started to surface again. The turning point came when detectives decided to re-examine old evidence, including a bite mark left on Sherry's arm. They pulled DNA from it, and to everyone's shock, it pointed to a female suspect, which didn't match the original robbery theory. The investigation turned inward, and quietly, they began watching Stephanie. The truth came crashing down in 2009, when Lazarus was arrested after more than 20 years of walking free. She had used her position in law enforcement to deflect suspicion, delay justice, and live a normal life, all while carrying the weight of a murder she thought she got away with. In 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. She's currently serving her time at the California Institution for Women. Stephanie didn't just commit a murder, she abused her badge, betrayed her oath, and evaded justice for decades, making her one of the most calculated and dangerous women in modern crime history. Dana Schlosser. Country, United States. Age at time of crime, 35. Dana Schlosser's story is one of the most unsettling crimes to ever shake Texas, not just because of what she did, but because of how disturbingly calm she was after doing it. On a quiet morning in November 2004, she picked up the phone, called 911, and told the dispatcher with chilling peace that she had cut off her baby's arms. When officers arrived at her Plano apartment, they found Dina soaked in blood, calmly listening to church hymns, while her 10-month-old daughter Margaret was lifeless in her crib. It wasn't a frenzy, it wasn't chaos. It was eerily silent, like she had completed some twisted divine task and was now at rest. What made it even darker was the fact that this act didn't come out of nowhere. Dina had been spiraling for months. She suffered from severe postpartum psychosis and religious delusions, which were clearly documented but not consistently treated. She became obsessed with biblical sacrifice stories, especially the tale of Abraham and Isaac, and believed that God was commanding her to offer up her daughter. Her husband and church community had reportedly noticed signs of her deteriorating mental health, but despite multiple hospital visits, she was repeatedly released back home. And when she finally acted on what she believed to be God's will, the system had already failed. During the trial, psychiatric experts confirmed that Dina was in a full psychotic break, detached from reality, unable to comprehend the consequences of her actions. The jury ultimately found her not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was committed to a psychiatric hospital. But the verdict left many stunned and furious. Perhaps the most controversial part of the story came years later, when she was quietly released into outpatient care in 2008. Whether you see her as a victim of untreated psychosis or a cold-blooded murderer masked by religion, the fact remains that Dina Schlosser committed one of the most haunting child murders in modern crime history, and somehow she walked out of it alive. Alyssa Bustamante, country, United States, age at time of crime, 15. Alyssa Bustamante was just 15 years old when she committed one of the most cold-blooded murders ever carried out by a teenager in the U.S. In October 2009, in the quiet town of St. Martins, Missouri, she lured her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Olton, into the woods, and then she strangled her, stabbed her multiple times in the chest, and buried her in a shallow grave she had dug days earlier. The disturbing part: Alyssa had dug not one but 2 graves in advance. She wasn't trying to cover up an impulsive act, but she was planning a murder, like someone planning a camping trip. Her motive? She wanted to know what it felt like to kill, literally. That's what she wrote in her journal shortly after the murder. She described the murder in detail and ended the entry with, "It was amazing." During the investigation, police discovered that she had a dark obsession with death, suicide, and violence. She was on antidepressants, frequently posted disturbing content online, and wrote about cutting and depression in her notebooks. But what shocked the public the most wasn't just what she did, it was how emotionless she was after doing it. During the trial, prosecutors revealed that Alyssa had been fantasizing about killing someone for a while, and Elizabeth was just unlucky enough to be nearby and vulnerable. Despite her age, the court tried her as an adult due to the premeditation, brutality, and complete lack of remorse. Her defense team argued mental instability and emotional trauma, but nothing could justify the monstrous act. The fact that she chose a child, an innocent 9-year-old, just for the thrill made her one of the coldest murderers in modern crime history. In 2012, Alyssa Bustamante was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. She is currently incarcerated at the Chillicothe Correctional Center in Missouri. Although she'll be eligible for parole in the future, many believe she should never walk free. After all, this wasn't a tragic accident or an emotional outburst. This was a calculated murder committed by a teenager who simply wanted to feel what it was like to end a life. And she did, with a grin. Isabella Guzman, country, United States, age at time of crime, 18. Isabella Guzman made headlines in 2013 when she murdered her mother in one of the most brutal domestic homicides in recent history. The 18-year-old had a strained relationship with her mother, Yunmi Hoy, and in the days leading up to the murder, things escalated. Isabella had been acting erratically, sending threatening emails and clashing with both her mom and stepfather. On August 28, she followed her mother into the upstairs bathroom and stabbed her more than 151 times. The attack was so violent that police said the scene looked like a horror movie. What disturbed investigators wasn't just the number of stab wounds, but it was the intensity behind them. Isabella used a folding knife and a separate kitchen knife to carry out the assault, stabbing her mother repeatedly in the face, neck, and torso. When officers arrived, they found Isabella calm, quiet, and unbothered, as if nothing had happened. She fled the house but was later found sitting on the grass at a shopping center, expressionless and detached. During the court proceedings, it became clear that Isabella was struggling with severe mental illness. Psychiatrists diagnosed her with paranoid schizophrenia, and her attorneys argued that she was suffering from delusions at the time of the murder. The court ultimately found her not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was committed to a mental health institution instead of prison. In recent years, Isabella resurfaced online after courtroom footage went viral on TikTok, with users commenting on her appearance rather than the horror of her crime. Today, she remains confined at the Colorado Mental Health Institute, where doctors continue to evaluate her mental state. Jasmine Richardson. Country, Canada. Age at time of crime, 12. Jasmine Richardson was just 12 years old when she became one of the youngest multiple murderers in Canadian history. In April 2006, she conspired with her 23-year-old boyfriend, Jeremy Steinke, to murder her entire family. The reason? Her parents had forbidden her from seeing him because of their massive age difference and Jeremy's obsession with dark, violent fantasy. Together, they plotted and carried out a plan that left Jasmine's mother and father stabbed to death in their home, and her 8-year-old brother brutally murdered as he begged for his life. What shook the public was not just the age difference, it was the level of calculation. Jasmine helped lure her parents into a trap, and Jeremy slaughtered them with knives. Then, in a deeply disturbing twist, Jasmine went upstairs and helped kill her little brother, later telling police it was necessary because she didn't want him to grow up without parents. No remorse, no fear. She wrote in her diary that she wanted to live out a gothic love story with her boyfriend, and that they planned to escape together and start a new life after the killings. Her trial revealed a dark world of online role-playing, manipulation, and obsession with vampires and death. Jeremy had told people he was a 300-year-old werewolf. Jasmine, despite her age, spoke about killing with chilling maturity. She was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, but due to Canadian law, couldn't be sentenced as an adult. She received 10 years, the maximum sentence under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, including psychiatric rehabilitation and community supervision. In 2016, Jasmine Richardson walked free at age 22 after completing her sentence. She changed her name and reportedly reintegrated into society with a clean record. Cold-blooded doesn't even begin to describe it. Jasmine didn't just destroy her family, she did it for love, and she did it without blinking. Taylor Renee Parker. Country, United States. Age at time of crime, 27. Taylor Renee Parker carried out one of the most horrific crimes in recent U.S. history, a crime so brutal it sounded like something from a twisted horror movie. In October 2020, she murdered 21-year-old Reagan Hancock, a pregnant woman who was nearly 8 months along, by stabbing her more than 100 times in her Texas home. But Taylor didn't stop there, as she cut the baby from Reagan's womb and tried to pass the child off as her own, all in an effort to keep her boyfriend from leaving her. That baby, sadly, did not survive. Taylor had been faking a pregnancy for months, wearing prosthetic bellies and staging fake ultrasound photos to keep up the lie. when her fabricated timeline began to unravel and pressure mounted to deliver the baby, she turned to a deadly plan. Taylor chose Reagan, someone she knew, and brutally attacked her while she was home alone. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment crime, as she had researched C-sections, practiced faking labor, and even watched videos on how to deliver a baby. After murdering Reagan, Taylor fled with the baby and pulled over in a panic, pretending to be a new mother who had just given birth on the side of the road. Authorities quickly saw through the ruse. Reagan's body was discovered by her own mother, who walked into the home to find her daughter lying in a pool of blood, stomach ripped open. Investigators later uncovered Taylor's web of lies, manipulations, and obsessive behavior. She wanted a baby so badly and to keep her boyfriend so desperately that she was willing to kill for it. In 2022, Taylor Renee Parker was sentenced to death in Texas after being convicted of capital murder. Her trial was filled with gruesome details, and the jury took little time to come to their decision. She now sits on death row at the Mountain View Unit, one of the few women to receive the death penalty in recent years. Brittany Gosney. Country, United States. Age at time of crime, 29. Brittany Gosney will forever be known as the Ohio mother who chose her boyfriend over her own children, and the price for that choice was her 6-year-old son's life. In February 2021, she tried to abandon her 3 kids in a rural park because her boyfriend didn't want them around. As she attempted to drive away, her son James Hutchinson clung to the car door in panic. But instead of stopping, Brittany hit the gas and dragged him under the vehicle, leaving him fatally injured. She later admitted to returning, finding him dead, and throwing his body in the trunk, then going on a shopping trip. Rather than calling the police or seeking help, Brittany and her boyfriend, James Hamilton, spent the next day dumping the little boy's body into the Ohio River. It took days for them to even report James missing, and when they finally did, their story didn't add up. Under pressure, Brittany cracked and revealed the horrific truth. She said she wanted to get rid of the kids because her boyfriend was threatening to leave her, cold, calculated, and completely detached, and she prioritized a man over her own blood. In court, prosecutors painted Brittany as a woman with no maternal instinct and zero remorse. Surveillance footage, text messages, and interviews all pointed to one thing: that this wasn't a tragic accident, as it was an intentional act of cruelty. James was a cheerful little boy who loved school and superheroes. His death sparked outrage across Ohio, especially after it was revealed that Brittany had abused her kids for years and ignored every opportunity to seek help or safety. Instead, she chose silence and violence. In September 2021, Brittany Gosney pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She is currently incarcerated at Dayton Correctional Institution in Ohio. Her boyfriend received 15 years for helping to hide the body and abuse her other children. Brittany's case is a heartbreaking example of a mother who turned predator, not in a moment of rage, but out of cold decision-making. She didn't just fail her child, but she killed him to make room for her relationship. And that level of betrayal is as cold-blooded as it gets. Shay Groves. Country, United Kingdom. Age at time of crime, 27. Shay Groves was obsessed with murder, not just in theory, but in lifestyle. Her bedroom was filled with serial killer memorabilia, which consisted of books, posters, weapons, even a portrait of Jeffrey Dahmer. But in July 2022, her fascination became real when she stabbed her boyfriend, Frankie Fitzgerald, 17 times in the neck and chest while he slept in her bed. After the murder, she didn't panic. She lit a cigarette, filmed his corpse with her phone, and began researching how to clean up a crime scene. To the world, Shay had crossed the line from dark fantasy into real, calculated homicide. She later claimed she killed Frankie in self-defense after years of emotional abuse, but her behavior after the crime told a very different story. She took selfies near his dead body, called a friend for advice on disposal methods, and even tried to frame Frankie as a potential abuser by manipulating their text messages. Police found that she had staged parts of the scene to make herself look like a victim, but forensic evidence, including blood spatter patterns and timestamps on her phone, painted her as the true aggressor in a vicious, premeditated killing. The court heard chilling testimony about her obsession with control, violence, and BDMS. She had installed surveillance cameras in her bedroom and frequently recorded their intimate encounters. Prosecutors argued that she murdered Frankie in a jealous rage after discovering he had been texting a teenage girl. But it wasn't just the act, and it was the aftermath. Shay calmly cleaned up, dumped bloody sheets, and made plans to cover up what she'd done. Her demeanor throughout the trial, smiling, smirking, even posing in the courtroom, left jurors and the public disturbed. In February 2023, Shay Groves was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years. She now serves her sentence in a UK women's prison, far from the twisted fantasy world she built for herself. Shay wasn't mentally ill. She wasn't pushed past a breaking point. She was someone who glorified killers until she became one. From teenage thrill killers to mothers who betrayed their own blood, these women didn't just commit murder, but they did it with ice in their veins. Some smiled through sentencing, others faked tears, but all of them left behind a trail of shock, heartbreak, and horror. These weren't crimes of passion, but they were crimes of purpose, calculated and cold. It's easy to picture killers as monsters in the shadows, but these women walked in broad daylight, smiled in photos, and held babies in their arms before turning deadly. Whether it was for control, jealousy, revenge, or just the thrill of it, they made their choices. And now they live with the consequences behind bars, or in rare cases, walking free while the rest of us try to understand what kind of mind could carry out such acts without blinking. If you found this series chilling, unforgettable, and real, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.